My name is Elena Martinez. I'm 32 years old, and last Tuesday I did something that completely shattered my family forever. When my sister Sophia casually announced her fourth pregnancy over dinner, expecting me to automatically step up as the unpaid nanny again, I finally snapped and revealed the explosive secret I'd been hiding for 2 years. What happened next destroyed everything we thought we knew about family loyalty, exposed the real reason behind my parents' favoritism, and set in motion a chain of events that would leave Sophia facing the consequences of her selfishness in the most unexpected way possible. Before I dive into this family drama that's been consuming my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Are you Team Elena, or do you think I went too far? Hit that like button if you've ever felt like the family scapegoat, and don't forget to subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. Trust me, by the end you'll understand why sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to burn everything down. Growing up, Sophia was always the golden child. 3 years younger than me, she had this effortless charm that made everyone fall in love with her instantly. While I was the responsible one getting straight A's and working part-time jobs in high school, Sophia was the free spirit who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. She dropped out of college twice, bounced from job to job, and somehow it was always justified as finding herself. When she got pregnant at 19 with her first child, Emma, everyone rallied around her. "She's so young, she needs our support," my mother would say. I was 22, fresh out of college, and somehow became the designated backup parent. Every weekend, every holiday, every emergency, I was the one who stepped up. Sophia would drop Emma off with barely any notice, sometimes disappearing for days with whatever boyfriend was current at the time. The pattern continued with her second child, Marcus, born when Emma was barely 2. Different father, same story. Sophia would cry about being overwhelmed. My parents would guilt me into helping, and I'd find myself changing diapers and doing midnight feedings while working my first real job as a marketing coordinator. My own social life became non-existent. Dating was impossible when you're essentially a single mother to your sister's kids. By the time Lily came along, child number 3 with father number 3, I was 29 and completely burned out. I'd moved into a bigger apartment specifically to accommodate the kids' impromptu visits, which had become more like permanent arrangements. Sophia would show up, dump the children, and vanish for weeks. Sometimes she'd resurface with lavish gifts bought with money she didn't have, playing the fun aunt role while I handled the actual parenting. The financial burden was crushing. I paid for school supplies, clothes, medical appointments, and countless other expenses while Sophia spent her welfare checks on designer bags and nights out. When I tried to discuss it with my parents, they'd always find ways to excuse her behavior. "She's doing her best," they'd insist. "You're so good with kids, Elena. You're a natural caretaker." What they never acknowledged was how this arrangement had completely hijacked my life. I'd turned down job opportunities that required travel, ended relationships because men couldn't handle my complicated situation, and watched my savings evaporate while supporting 3 children who weren't mine. My friends slowly drifted away, tired of canceled plans and conversations that always revolved around the latest crisis in Sophia's chaotic world. The breaking point should have come years earlier, but I kept telling myself it was temporary. That Sophia would mature, that she'd find stability, that I'd eventually get my life back. Instead, she seemed to grow more dependent and entitled with each passing year. She'd make grand speeches about getting her life together, then disappear again, leaving me to pick up the pieces with her confused, emotionally damaged children. The worst part was watching Emma, Marcus, and Lily struggle with their mother's inconsistency. Emma, now 13, had developed anxiety issues and clung to me desperately whenever Sophia showed up, terrified of being abandoned again. Marcus, 11, acted out aggressively at school, and Lily, only 8, still asked why mommy didn't want to live with them. I became their therapist, their stability, their everything, while Sophia got to be the glamorous, fun parent who swooped in with promises she never kept. My resentment grew toxic. I started avoiding family gatherings, screening Sophia's calls, and fantasizing about moving across the country. But every time I tried to set boundaries, my parents would intervene with emotional manipulation about family obligations and how much the children needed me. The guilt was suffocating, but what choice did I have? These kids didn't ask to be born to a narcissistic mother who treated motherhood like a hobby she could abandon whenever it became inconvenient. That Tuesday evening started innocuously enough. My parents had invited me over for dinner, claiming they missed seeing me since I'd been so busy lately. The truth was, I'd been deliberately distancing myself, trying to establish some semblance of boundaries after years of being the family doormat. When I arrived at their modest suburban home, the familiar sense of my mother's cooking should have been comforting, but instead filled me with dread. Sophia was already there, of course, looking radiant in a flowing dress that accentuated curves I hadn't noticed before. She greeted me with her signature bright smile, the one that had charmed her way out of countless responsibilities over the years. The kids weren't with her, which immediately set off alarm bells. Emma, Marcus, and Lily were supposed to be staying with me that weekend, another emergency situation that had become routine. "Where are the kids?" I asked, hanging my jacket in the closet. "Oh, they're with Jake," she replied airily, referring to her current boyfriend of 6 months. "He's so great with them, Elena. You'd really like him." I bit back my immediate response about how every boyfriend was supposedly great with them until the novelty wore off. Instead, I focused on the dinner preparation, helping my mother set the table while making small talk about work and weather. My father was in his usual spot in the living room, half watching a baseball game while scrolling through his phone. The conversation during dinner was typical, my parents asking about my job, me deflecting questions about my dating life, and Sophia regaling us with stories about her latest adventures. She'd apparently started some online business selling handmade jewelry, though knowing her track record, I gave it 3 months before she moved on to the next passion project. Then came the moment that changed everything. "Actually," Sophia said, setting down her fork with theatrical precision, "I have some exciting news to share with everyone." My stomach dropped. The gleam in her eyes, the carefully orchestrated timing, the fact that she'd arranged this family dinner, I knew exactly what was coming, but part of me desperately hoped I was wrong. "I'm pregnant," she announced, her hands moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. "Jake and I are having a baby." The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. My parents exchanged glances, surprise mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. My mother was the first to recover, jumping up to embrace Sophia with forced enthusiasm. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful news," she exclaimed, though her voice carried an undertone of exhaustion. "When are you due?" "Early spring," Sophia beamed. "We just found out last week. We're thinking about names already. Madison if it's a girl, maybe Connor for a boy." My father nodded approvingly, offering congratulations that sounded genuine enough, but I caught him rubbing his temples in a gesture I recognized as his stress response. Meanwhile, I sat frozen, a piece of chicken halfway to my mouth, processing the implications of this announcement. 4 children. 4 different fathers. And somehow, inevitably, I would be expected to help raise this one too. The pattern was so predictable it was almost insulting. Sophia would have her moment of excitement, play house with Jake for a few months, then reality would set in, and she'd need her reliable sister to handle the actual work of parenting. "Elena, aren't you going to congratulate your sister?" My mother prompted, her tone carrying that familiar edge of disapproval that always appeared when I failed to react with appropriate enthusiasm to Sophia's announcements. I forced a smile and muttered something about being happy for her, but inside, something was crystallizing. A cold, hard resolution that I'd been building toward for years. This was it. This was the moment I'd finally had enough. "That's 4 kids now," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral. "That's going to be a lot of work." Sophia waved dismissively. Oh, I know it'll be challenging, but Jake is really supportive. And you know how much you love being an aunt. The kids adore you. There it was. The assumption. The expectation that I would once again sacrifice my own life to enable her irresponsibility. She hadn't even asked. She'd simply assumed my compliance, just like always. My parents nodded along, already mentally assigning me the role of backup parent for child number 4. They probably thought they were being subtle, but I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads, calculating how to once again manipulate me into carrying the burden of their precious youngest daughter's choices. But this time was different. This time, I had information that would change everything. For 2 years, I'd been sitting on a secret that could destroy the carefully constructed narrative of Sophia as the innocent victim of circumstance. A secret I'd discovered by accident and kept quiet out of some misguided sense of family loyalty. As I watched my sister bask in the attention and praise for bringing another child into the world she couldn't properly care for, I made a decision that would explode our family dynamics forever. The time for protecting Sophia from the consequences of her actions was over. The dinner concluded with plans being made around me as usual. My mother was already discussing baby showers and nursery arrangements, while my father offered to help Jake find a better job to support the expanding family. Sophia sat there accepting all the attention and promises of support with the serene confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for her choices. I excused myself early, claiming work deadlines, but really I needed space to process what I'd just heard and decide how to handle what I knew. The drive home felt surreal, like I was moving through a fog of suppressed rage and mounting determination. For years, I'd enabled this cycle by staying silent, by being the dutiful sister who cleaned up messes without asking uncomfortable questions. But 2 years ago, I'd stumbled across information that painted Sophia's financial struggles in a very different light. It started innocuously. She'd asked to borrow my laptop because hers was broken again. While helping her log into her email to check something urgent, I accidentally clicked on the wrong folder and saw bank statements she'd apparently screenshot and saved. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Sophia wasn't broke because she was an overwhelmed single mother struggling to make ends meet. She was broke because she was systematically draining every resource available to her, including several she'd never mentioned to the family. Credit cards maxed out on luxury purchases, payday loans with astronomical interest rates, and most shocking of all, she'd been receiving substantial child support payments from Emma and Marcus's fathers that she'd never told anyone about. The amounts were staggering. Emma's father, who'd moved to California for work, was sending over $800 monthly. Marcus's father, despite being portrayed as a deadbeat, was actually paying $650 every month like clockwork. That was nearly $1,500 in support payments that Sophia had been secretly collecting while crying poverty to our parents and guilting me into covering the children's expenses. But the discovery that truly shattered my perception of my sister came in the form of banking records showing regular transfers to online gambling sites. Thousands of dollars, money that should have been spent on her children's needs, was being funneled into slot machines and poker games. The timestamps showed she was gambling away her support payments within days of receiving them, then calling me in tears about not being able to afford groceries or school supplies. I'd confronted her privately, expecting shame or remorse. Instead, I got deflection and manipulation. She claimed the gambling was just for fun and that she usually won money. The child support payments were complicated, and she needed them for other expenses that I wouldn't understand. When I pressed for details, she broke down crying and accused me of being jealous of her relationship with the kids' fathers, claiming I was trying to sabotage her happiness. Like always, she'd managed to turn herself into the victim, but this time I wasn't buying it. I gave her an ultimatum: stop gambling and start using the child support for its intended purpose, or I would tell our parents and the children's fathers what was really happening. She promised to change, swore it would never happen again, and for a while, I believed her. That was my mistake. Over the following months, I occasionally checked her social media and noticed signs that nothing had changed. Designer handbags appeared in photos despite her claims of financial hardship. She took mysterious weekend trips while the kids stayed with me, supposedly visiting friends, but always returning with expensive purchases and stories that didn't quite add up. The final confirmation came 6 months ago when Emma, in a moment of confused honesty, mentioned that Mommy said Daddy sends money for us, but we never get any new things. When I gently probed, Marcus chimed in that their father had promised to buy them bikes with his special money for kids, but Sophia had told them the money got lost and they'd have to wait. These children, who I'd been buying clothes and school supplies for out of my own pocket, had fathers who were actually providing financial support. Their mother was stealing from them, gambling away their future, then manipulating the entire family into filling the gap she'd created through her addiction and selfishness. The knowledge had been eating at me ever since, but I'd kept quiet for the sake of family peace and because I genuinely thought Sophia might eventually mature and take responsibility. Her announcement about a 4th pregnancy destroyed any remaining hope I had for her growth or change. If anything, she was doubling down on the same destructive pattern, secure in the knowledge that her family would always bail her out. As I sat in my apartment that night, looking around at the space I'd arranged to accommodate my sister's children, I realized I was done being complicit in this charade. The kids deserved better than a mother who stole from them and a family that enabled her behavior. They deserve stability, honesty, and adults who put their needs first instead of protecting Sophia's feelings and reputation. Tomorrow, I would make some phone calls. I would gather documentation. And then I would give Sophia one last chance to come clean before I exposed everything. The thought terrified me. I'd never been the confrontational type, never the one who rocked the boat or caused family drama. But watching her announce another pregnancy while mentally calculating how to shift parental responsibility onto me had finally pushed me past my breaking point. The golden child was about to discover that even the most patient saints have limits, and I'd just reached mine. 3 days after Sophia's announcement, I called her and requested a private meeting. My voice must have carried something different because she immediately became defensive, asking if I was okay, with a tone that suggested she was already preparing her victim narrative. I insisted we meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown where she couldn't storm out dramatically or call our parents for immediate backup. She arrived 20 minutes late, as usual, wearing another expensive outfit that contradicted her constant financial complaints. Her pregnancy was barely noticeable, but she'd already started the performative hand-to-belly gestures that I remembered from her previous pregnancies. The sight made my stomach turn with a mixture of disgust and sadness for the child who would soon be born into this dysfunction. "So what's this about?" she asked, settling into her chair with an air of impatience. "I hope you're not going to lecture me about having another baby. Jake and I are really excited, and we don't need any negativity right now." I'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times, but sitting across from her, seeing that familiar expression of entitled defiance, I felt my carefully planned words evaporating. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I'd prepared, bank statements, screenshots, and documentation I'd gathered over the past 2 years. "We need to talk about the child support payments," I said quietly, placing the folder on the table between us. The change in her expression was instant and telling. Color drained from her face, and her hand instinctively moved to her purse as if she wanted to flee. For a moment, the confident mask slipped, and I saw something I'd rarely witnessed in my sister: genuine fear. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Emma's dad sends $800 a month. Marcus's dad sends $650. That's $1,450 every month, Sophia. Money that's supposed to be for your children's needs." I opened the folder and slid the first document across the table. "Money you've been gambling away while I buy their school clothes and pay for their medical appointments." Her eyes darted around the coffee shop, checking if anyone could overhear our conversation. When she looked back at me, the vulnerability had been replaced by anger, not shame or remorse, but fury at being caught. "You had no right to go through my private information," she hissed. "That's my business, Elena. Just because you don't have a life doesn't mean you get to spy on mine." The attack on my personal life, a classic Sophia deflection, only strengthened my resolve. Those children are living in my apartment half the time because you can't afford to take care of them. Except you can afford it, can't you? You just choose to spend their money on slot machines instead. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms defensively. You don't understand how hard it is. I'm under so much stress, and sometimes I need to blow off steam. It's not like I'm hurting anyone. You're stealing from your own children. The words came out louder than I intended, causing nearby patrons to glance our way. I lowered my voice, but maintained the intensity. Emma asked me why her daddy doesn't love her enough to help buy her new shoes. Do you know how that felt? Lying to her because I was protecting you. For a moment, something flickered across Sophia's face that might have been shame, but it disappeared quickly. She reached for her purse, probably intending to leave, but I wasn't finished. And now you want to bring another child into this mess. Another kid you'll dump on me when the novelty wears off. Another innocent life you'll financially exploit to fund your gambling addiction. I don't have a gambling addiction, she snapped. I can stop anytime I want. And Jake is different. He's going to help with everything. You'll see. The delusion in her voice was heartbreaking. That's what you said about Marcus's dad. And Emma's. They were all going to be different, remember? They were all going to be the perfect family man who would solve all your problems. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. You're just jealous because you're alone and bitter. You've never had what I have, men who love me, beautiful children, a real life instead of just work and responsibility. The cruelty in her words hit exactly where she'd intended, but instead of the usual guilt and self-doubt, I felt something else. Clarity. This was who my sister really was, someone so narcissistic that she could turn her theft from her own children into an attack on my character. Sit down, Sophia. My voice was calm now, deadly calm. Because if you walk away right now, my next conversation is with Emma and Marcus's fathers. I'm sure they'd be very interested to know where their support payments are actually going. She froze, her hand on her purse strap, processing the threat. Slowly, she sank back into her chair, and for the first time in our adult relationship, I saw something new in her eyes, the recognition that I wasn't going to be manipulated this time. What do you want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What did I want? I wanted my life back. I wanted those 3 beautiful children to have a mother who put their needs first. I wanted our parents to see Sophia for who she really was instead of the carefully constructed image she presented. I wanted justice for years of manipulation and exploitation. But most of all, I wanted to make sure that the 4th child she was carrying wouldn't become another victim of her selfishness and addiction. I want you to come clean to everyone, I said. Mom, Dad, the kids' fathers, everyone. I want you to admit what you've been doing with the support money, get help for your gambling problem, and start being an actual parent to your children. She laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. And if I don't? Then I expose everything myself. The gambling, the hidden support payments, all of it. And I stop enabling you completely. No more free childcare, no more financial help, no more covering for you when you disappear for days. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the ambient noise of the coffee shop around us. I could see her calculating, trying to find an angle or manipulation that would get her out of this situation with minimal consequences. But for once, she was trapped by the truth. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my family, my sister, and the real reason our parents had always favored her over me. Sophia stared at me for a long moment, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. Then, unexpectedly, she started laughing. Not the bitter laugh from before, but something that sounded almost relieved. You really want to know the truth, Elena, she said, leaning forward with a strange gleam in her eyes. The whole truth? Because once I tell you this, there's no going back. Your perfect little world where you're the responsible one and I'm the screw-up is going to crumble. Something in her tone made my stomach clench with dread, but I nodded. Tell me. She took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. No more defensiveness, no more manipulation, just cold, hard facts. The gambling isn't about addiction, Elena. It's about laundering money. Money that Dad has been funneling through my accounts for the past 5 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. What are you talking about? Dad's construction company hasn't been doing as well as he pretends. He's been cutting corners, using substandard materials, bribing inspectors. When that apartment complex collapsed in Newark 2 years ago, that was one of his projects. He's been hiding assets, moving money through different accounts to avoid liability in the lawsuits. I felt the world tilting around me. That's impossible. Dad would never. Check the dates on those bank statements you're so proud of collecting, Sophia interrupted. The large deposits always come right before I lose money gambling. I'm not gambling, Elena. I'm moving Dad's dirty money through online accounts where it can't be traced back to him. My hands were shaking as I reached for the folder, frantically checking the dates she was referencing. She was right, the pattern was there, clear as day once you knew what to look for. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this? Because he promised to pay for Emma's medical treatments. Her voice cracked slightly. You know Emma's been having those episodes, the ones where she spaces out and doesn't remember things? The doctors said it might be early-onset epilepsy, but insurance won't cover the specialists she needs. Dad said he'd take care of everything if I helped him with his business problems. The floor dropped out from under me. Emma's health issues. I'd been the one taking her to regular pediatric appointments, but Sophia had insisted on handling the specialist consultations herself. I'd assumed it was one of her rare attempts at actual parenting. But the child support money goes straight to the medical expenses the insurance won't cover. Every penny of it. Do you think I wanted you to know Emma might have a serious neurological condition? Do you think I wanted to admit that I can't afford to get my own daughter proper medical care? I was struggling to process this information. Everything I thought I knew was shifting, rearranging itself into a picture that made me sick to my stomach. And Mom knows. Sophia nodded grimly. Mom knows about the money laundering. She doesn't know about Emma's condition. Dad made me promise to keep that quiet because he didn't want her to worry. But she knows why I've been gambling and why they've been so supportive of me having more kids. More kids. The words came out strangled. Insurance fraud, Elena. Each child means more coverage, more claims that can be filed and processed through different accounts. This pregnancy isn't an accident. It's a business decision. They need more legitimate medical expenses to justify the money movement. I stared at her, horror washing over me in waves. You're using your own children as cover for insurance fraud. I'm trying to keep my family alive, she snapped, some of the old Sophia returning. Emma needs those treatments, and if this is what it takes to get them, then yes, I'll have another baby. I'll do whatever it takes. The coffee shop around us seemed to fade away as the implications hit me. Our parents, my parents, had been running a criminal enterprise, using their daughter and grandchildren as unwitting accomplices. The favoritism, the constant excuses for Sophia's behavior, the pressure on me to be the reliable one while she got away with everything. It wasn't family dysfunction, it was calculated crime. The kids don't know, Sophia said quietly, reading the horror on my face. Emma just knows she has to see special doctors sometimes. Marcus and Lily don't know anything. And this new baby, if everything goes according to plan, none of them will ever have to know. According to plan? I echoed. Dad's lawyers think the statute of limitations will run out on the Newark collapse in 2 more years. If we can keep moving money and avoid detection until then, he'll be in the clear. The medical expenses for the kids provide perfect cover. Who's going to question a grandfather wanting to help pay for his grandchildren's health care? I felt physically ill. And what happens to me in all this? What's my role in your family criminal conspiracy? You're the perfect cover story, she said matter-of-factly. The responsible sister who helps with childcare. If anyone ever investigates, you're the innocent one who just loves being an aunt. Your clean record, your stable job, your obvious genuine care for the kids, you make the whole family look legitimate. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. For years, I'd been an unwitting accomplice to money laundering and insurance fraud, my genuine love for the children used as camouflage for criminal activity. Every sacrifice I'd made, every boundary I'd crossed, every moment of guilt about not doing enough, it had all been orchestrated to serve their illegal scheme. And if I expose all this? I asked. Sophia's expression hardened. Then Dad goes to prison, Mom probably goes with him, I lose any chance of getting Emma the treatment she needs, and all 3 kids end up in foster care while you explain to child services why you've been harboring fugitives. She leaned back, crossing her arms with a bitter smile. Still want to be the hero, Elena? Still want to burn everything down for the sake of your principles? I sat in stunned silence, the weight of Sophia's revelation crushing down on me like a physical force. Every assumption I'd made about my family, every resentment I'd harbored, every moment of self-righteousness I'd felt, it all crumbled into dust. The responsible sister who'd been enabling her irresponsible sibling was actually the naive pawn in a much darker game. I need to see Emma's medical records, I said finally, my voice barely audible. Sophia reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. I brought them. I figured if I was going to tell you the truth, I might as well show you everything. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope and began reading. The medical terminology was complex, but the implications were clear. Emma wasn't just having occasional episodes. She was showing early signs of a rare form of juvenile epilepsy that could progress to cognitive decline if not properly treated. The recommended treatment protocol involved experimental therapies that cost over $3,000 per month, none of it covered by insurance. The first specialist said she had maybe a year before the condition becomes irreversible, Sophia whispered, watching me read. That was 8 months ago. Every treatment she's gotten since then has been paid for with money from Dad's arrangement. I looked up from the papers, tears blurring my vision. Why didn't you tell me? I would have helped. I would have found a way. With what money? You're barely managing your own expenses while supporting 3 kids who aren't yours. And even if you could afford it, legitimate medical financing would require documentation, credit checks, paper trails. This way, Emma gets treatment and nobody asks questions about where the money came from. The cruel logic of it was undeniable. In their twisted way, they had found a solution that saved Emma's life while protecting the family from legal consequences. But the cost of that solution was turning innocent children into unwitting participants in insurance fraud and money laundering. What about the new baby? I asked. What medical condition are you going to fake for this one? Sophia flinched. We don't fake anything. Pregnancy complications are common, and with my history of difficult births, there will be legitimate expenses. The plan is for me to have complications that require extended bed rest, possible premature delivery, NICU time. All legitimate claims that provide cover for moving larger amounts of money. You're willing to risk your life and your baby's life for this scheme. I'm willing to risk anything to keep Emma alive, she said fiercely. You think I don't know how fucked up this all is? You think I don't hate myself for bringing children into this mess? But Emma is already here, and she's sick, and this is the only way to save her. I stared at the medical reports, my mind racing through impossible calculations. If I exposed the money laundering, Dad would definitely go to prison and Emma would lose access to her treatments. If I stayed silent, I'd be complicit in fraud, and more children would be born into this criminal web. There has to be another way, I said desperately. Legal ways to get Emma help. Medical charity programs, fundraising, something. I've tried everything, Sophia replied. Do you think this was my first choice? I spent months applying for medical assistance programs, charity care, research study participation. Emma doesn't qualify for most programs because technically we have insurance, and the programs she does qualify for have waiting lists that are 2 years long. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of Emma from last week, my beautiful, intelligent niece smiling at the camera while connected to monitoring equipment during one of her specialist appointments. Look at her, Elena. Really look. Can you see how much thinner she's gotten? How tired she looks even when she smiles. The treatments are working, but slowly. If we stop now, in 6 months she'll start having seizures that could cause permanent brain damage. In a year, she might not remember who we are. The photo broke something inside me. Emma, who called me her second mom, who did homework at my kitchen table every day, who still crawled into my bed during thunderstorms. The thought of losing her sharp wit, her infectious laugh, her bright future, it was unbearable. And if the authorities catch on to what Dad's been doing, then we all go down together, and Emma dies anyway, Sophia said bluntly. At least this way, she has a chance. I closed my eyes, trying to think clearly through the emotional chaos. How long does this have to continue? 18 more months, maybe 2 years. Long enough for the statute of limitations to run out on the building collapse, and long enough for Emma to complete the treatment protocol. After that, Dad can legitimately retire, wind down the construction business, and we can all go back to being a normal, dysfunctional family. And the new baby? Will hopefully be born healthy into a family that's finally free of all this mess. Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. This is my last pregnancy, Elena. After this, Jake and I are going to get married, move somewhere far away from all this chaos, and try to build something clean and honest for our kids. I wanted to believe her, but trusting Sophia had burned me before. How do I know you're telling the truth about any of this? How do I know Emma is really sick and this isn't just another elaborate manipulation? She reached into the envelope and pulled out additional papers. Lab results, brain scans, specialist consultations from 3 different medical centers. The documentation was overwhelming and consistent. Emma was genuinely, seriously ill, and her condition required exactly the treatment Sophia claimed to be paying for. Call Dr. Martinez at Children's Hospital, she said, writing down a phone number. Emma's case number is on these papers. They'll confirm everything I've told you, as long as you identify yourself as family. I took the phone number with shaking hands, knowing that this single conversation would determine whether I destroyed my family to expose their crimes or became an active participant in fraud to save my niece's life. The weight of the decision was crushing, but as I looked at Emma's photo one more time, I realized I'd already made my choice. Some lines couldn't be uncrossed, some knowledge couldn't be unknown, and some people, especially innocent children, were worth protecting at any cost. I made the call to Dr. Martinez that afternoon, and every word Sophia had told me was confirmed. Emma's condition was real, serious, and being effectively managed by treatments that cost more than most people's annual salary. When I asked about alternative funding sources, the doctor's response was brutally honest. Private insurance rarely covers experimental treatments, and by the time Emma would reach the top of charity care waiting lists, it would likely be too late for intervention. The next 2 weeks were the most agonizing of my life. I found myself looking at Emma differently during our daily routines, seeing the subtle signs I'd missed, the moments of confusion, the headaches she dismissed as tiredness, the way she sometimes stared blankly for a few seconds before rejoining conversations. How had I not noticed my brilliant niece was fighting for her cognitive future every single day? The moral weight was suffocating. Every day I stayed silent, I became more complicit in fraud. Every day I considered exposing everything. I imagined Emma's condition deteriorating while we waited for legal alternatives that might never come. I consulted lawyers anonymously, researched whistleblower protections, and explored every possible way to save Emma without destroying our family. But the conclusion was always the same. There was no clean solution. Then, 3 weeks after my confrontation with Sophia, something happened that changed everything again. Jake, Sophia's supposedly supportive boyfriend, disappeared. Not gradually, not with explanations or excuses. He simply vanished overnight, taking with him $2,800 in cash that Sophia had hidden in their apartment for Emma's next treatment cycle. I found out when Sophia called me sobbing at 2 a.m., barely coherent through her panic and rage. She'd come home from a late doctor's appointment with Emma to find their apartment ransacked and Jake gone. Along with the cash, he'd taken her laptop, some jewelry, and worst of all, Emma's medical files and insurance information. He knew, she kept repeating through her tears. He knew about Emma, about the money, about everything. I trusted him, and he used it against us. The betrayal was devastating, but the practical implications were catastrophic. Without those medical files, Emma's treatment schedule would be disrupted. Without the cash, they couldn't pay for next week's therapy session. And if Jake decided to use his knowledge about the money laundering as leverage or revenge, our entire family could be exposed. That's when I realized the true scope of what my father had created. This wasn't just fraud, it was a house of cards that required perfect coordination and absolute trust among all participants. One person with knowledge and malicious intent could bring everything crashing down. I drove to Sophia's apartment immediately, finding her pacing frantically while Emma slept peacefully in her bedroom, unaware that her future hung in the balance of adult decisions and criminal enterprises. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know," Sophia admitted, collapsing onto her couch. "Dad's already moved this month's money through the gambling accounts. We can't access it for another week without triggering audit flags. Emma's appointment is Tuesday, and it costs $1,200. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Beneath the entitled attitude and manipulative behavior was a woman who'd been carrying an impossible burden. She wasn't just a selfish mother dumping her responsibilities on others. She was someone making horrific choices to keep her daughter alive while protecting her family from criminal prosecution. "I'll pay for Emma's appointment," I said quietly. Sophia looked up surprised. "Elena, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Because she's my niece, and I love her, and this isn't her fault." I sat down beside her. "But we need to end this, Sophia. All of it. The money laundering, the fraud, bringing another child into this mess. It has to stop. But Emma will get the treatment she needs. I'll mortgage my apartment if I have to. We'll start a legitimate fundraising campaign, apply for every medical assistance program available, and find legal ways to pay for her care. It might take longer, it might be harder, but it won't require turning our whole family into criminals." Sophia stared at me for a long moment. "And Dad?" That was the hardest part. Dad made his choices when he cut corners on that building project. The money laundering just made everything worse. If he gets caught, that's the consequence of his actions, not something we need to prevent by committing more crimes. Over the following months, everything unraveled exactly as I'd predicted, but not in the way anyone expected. Jake, it turned out, was even worse than we'd imagined. He'd been documenting evidence of the money laundering operation, planning to blackmail our family for ongoing payments. His mistake was trying to sell that information to competitors of my father's construction company. The investigation that followed exposed not just my father's fraud, but a wider network of construction industry corruption involving dozens of contractors and city officials. Dad was arrested, but his cooperation with federal investigators earned him a reduced sentence. Mom was charged as an accessory, but received probation due to her limited involvement. Sophia's pregnancy ended in an early miscarriage. Whether from stress or design, I'll never know, but she claimed it was a relief. Without the pressure of maintaining the fraud scheme, she finally admitted she'd never wanted another child and had only agreed to the pregnancy because she felt trapped by circumstances. The most unexpected twist came during the federal investigation. When authorities seized Dad's business records, They discovered something that changed everything. The construction company's insurance policy included a previously unknown clause that covered legal fees and victim compensation for structural failures. Dad had been laundering money and risking his family's future to avoid liability that was actually covered by insurance the entire time. The settlement from the insurance company was more than enough to pay for Emma's complete treatment protocol through a legitimate medical payment plan. The experimental therapy worked exactly as hoped. Emma's condition stabilized, her episodes stopped, and her cognitive development returned to normal parameters. Jake was eventually arrested for attempted extortion and fraud. He'd been running similar schemes with 2 other families, using charm and fake emotional connections to gain access to financial information for blackmail purposes. As for me, I testified as a cooperating witness and received immunity from prosecution. The judge noted that my efforts to expose the scheme and protect the children demonstrated that I'd been manipulated rather than willingly complicit. My relationship with Emma, Marcus, and Lily grew even stronger as they moved in with me permanently, while Sophia served an 18-month sentence for money laundering. Today, 2 years later, Emma is a healthy, brilliant 15-year-old who wants to study neuroscience in college. Marcus has channeled his earlier behavioral issues into competitive debate, and Lily is thriving in middle school. Sophia, now out of prison, is working as a paralegal and living independently for the first time in her adult life. She sees the kids regularly but respects the boundaries we've established. Our parents divorced after Dad's release from prison. Mom moved to Florida and maintains minimal contact with the family. Dad sold the construction company and now works as a project manager for someone else's firm, trying to rebuild his life and reputation one honest day at a time. The house of lies and manipulation that defined our family for so long is gone, replaced by something messier but infinitely more honest. We're still dealing with the aftermath, still learning how to be genuine with each other after years of secrets and schemes. But Emma is alive and thriving, and that makes every difficult conversation and legal complication worth it. Looking back, I realized that my decision to confront Sophia that day at the coffee shop wasn't really about stopping her from having another baby or calling out her irresponsibility. It was about finally refusing to be complicit in a system that prioritized appearances over truth, that protected adults' feelings over children's welfare, and that asked me to sacrifice my integrity to maintain other people's lies. Sometimes doing the right thing means watching everything burn down so something better can grow from the ashes. Sometimes being the responsible one means taking responsibility for saying no to the people you love when they ask you to enable their destructive choices. And sometimes the greatest act of family loyalty is refusing to let your family continue down a path that will ultimately destroy them. So here's my question for you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where doing the right thing meant potentially hurting the people you love most? How do you balance family loyalty with personal integrity when the two seem to be in direct conflict? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, because these are the kinds of impossible choices that define who we become as human beings. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It really helps me reach more people who might need to hear that they're not alone in dealing with complicated family dynamics. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about the messy reality of family relationships, because let's be honest, every family has secrets, and sometimes bringing them into the light is the only way to heal. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it, because you never know who's carrying the weight of family secrets and feeling like they have to choose between loyalty and integrity. And remember, sometimes the people who seem to have it all figured out are actually fighting battles you can't see, making impossible choices with no perfect solutions. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that even in our darkest family moments, there's always hope for healing, growth, and building something better from the truth. Life has taught me that authentic relationships, even difficult ones, are always worth more than comfortable lies. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is refusing to enable their worst impulses, even when it costs you everything you thought you knew about love and loyalty.